Thank you for UWGB. You have been, the 11 years that I served in Greater Green Bay, just a terrific partner to work with for the community. And this UW Green Bay Kickoff and International Women's Day on Monday is a great time to celebrate. We can look toward Washington and see our first female vice president, our first female secretary of Treasury, and more women serving in the 117th Congress than we have ever seen before in those hallowed halls. I love turning on the evening news or opening a news feed on my iPhone and seeing all these smart, committed, powerful women in the news. And while I prefer to be viewing all of your smart, committed, powerful faces with this COVID reality that we're dealing with, I am grateful to know that you're present online virtually. So thank you. But this is a day also a great time to challenge what we see. Take Congress, for instance. Those women make up 27% of the House and Senate overall. Yes, that's historic, but it's also a whole lot less than the 50.8% share of the US population that we make up as women. Gender bias is alive and well in Washington and in our corporate boardrooms and in our classrooms, really just about anywhere we can imagine. We even see it on our Zoom calls. Just last week, my niece Lauren told me of a recent Zoom with a young male techie coworker, their customers, and Lauren. And Lauren shared that she was exasperated when the coworker said to all on the Zoom call, "Well, Lauren's the beauty and I am the brains," even though Lauren was leading the presentation. So you all may have examples of gender bias being alive and well. And as Bridget mentioned, there's tremendous amount of evidence. There's tremendous research. We have the reasons for some of the differences. And now we need to challenge ourselves to do something about it. Research from McKinsey tells us that women are promoted based upon accomplishments, while their male counterparts are promoted on potential. Now just think about that for a moment. Women have to demonstrate proof, while male counterparts are assumed to have the potential to succeed. So how do we unlock the leadership potential of women in our workplaces? By intentionally acknowledging this reality and purposefully acting to change it. We see this reality even when the intention is to include women's voices at the table. Former President Barack Obama had a West Wing staff that was 39% female, more than any other past administration. Yet women found themselves often admitted, both consciously and unconsciously. Smart, driven women found themselves excluded from major decision-making meetings. They acknowledged the reality, met together, actually met with former President Barack Obama, and agreed to act. One effort involved women purposefully amplifying things other women said at meetings. It sounded something like, "I want to return to what Angela said a few minutes ago." And if a man tried to claim credit for something a female colleague had raised earlier, they'd call it out and say, "I think I heard Angela raise that exact point in our meeting last week." At one point during negotiations over what was called the Grand Bargain budget deal at the time, women in the West Wing actually found that they were having an important meeting in the Oval Office. They met outside and said, "Wait a minute." And they walked in and walked right into the Oval Office and challenged their exclusion and just sat down. I've served in healthcare delivery for more than 40 years, 34 of them in the C-suite. Healthcare systems are staffed primarily by women. They're 75% female, while the CEOs and leadership are predominantly males. For 11 years, I served as the regional CEO responsible for 4 hospitals, a physician-hospital partnership, and a health plan. And in Northeastern Wisconsin, you don't know those as the HSHS, St. Vincent, St. Mary's, St. Nick's, and St. Clair's, Prevea Health Partnership with us, and the Prevea 360 Health Plan. I am proud of what I achieved in 35 years of leadership. But believe me, the top of my head was pretty weary sometimes and pretty sore sometimes from bumping into the glass ceiling. I am now retired and happily serving as an executive coach. Most of my clients have been women. I'm serving on a number of boards, and I'm an active grandma. The grandkids call me Gaga. I'm not Lady Gaga, I'm Grandma Gaga. Yet the reality of gender bias still frustrates me. And Gaga is going to challenge it absolutely everywhere that she can. For me, the purposeful challenge means 2 central things. 1, our communities, our organizations, and indeed our country will perform better when women leaders are at the decision-making tables. 2, women should pay it forward for other women. Let's make that choice to amplify each other and march into the Oval Office or whatever office together when we are shut out. I was asked to provide an example of a challenge and some of my personal challenges over the years. And there were quite a few, but I decided to share these 2. This first one, I really never considered this first example as a gender bias issue, but rather one of other leaders' lack of knowledge or insight into a current state, which to me was a very clear reality, a needed direction. Most of my bosses, and as a CEO, one of my kids said, well, aren't you the boss? As a CEO, you have more bosses than anybody else. You have a board, you sometimes report to a region. I wasn't in a region, I reported to a system. So we have more bosses than anyone else. But most of my bosses and my direct reports in the C-suite were male. I needed to put my job on the line for a decision regarding the electronic medical record for our hospitals in Greater Green Bay and our clinics. In this situation, it took incredible courage, persistence, building a coalition of support. And I'm going to repeat that, building a coalition of support while you're navigating complex political and really significant financial realities. This was not a small endeavor. Many male counterparts were asking me to abandon this effort. Just don't, and don't push it. Although I have to say, I had many great male partners that were with me all the way, such as Dr. Ashok Rai, Dr. Dan DeGroot, Dr. Thomas Huffer, to name a few. I was really steadfast based upon really an in-depth core business, knowledge of the core business of healthcare delivery, which really is patient care. Knowledge of our local and state context, and awareness of the high percentage of service that we provide to patients, which is really information. I was convinced that safe, timely, effective, efficient, and patient-centered care requires solid, reliable work processes supported by a super IT platform. And that's essential to sustain and support the skilled, dedicated healthcare team members. Now, the reason I share this challenge is that it required building a coalition of like-minded people, regardless of gender. Don't let it get in the way. To get something that's really important implemented, that at one time seemed impossible, and quite frankly, I was told was impossible. So it requires commitment, persistence, building a solid case, and solid relationships to get something done. The second challenge I wanted to share was to my fellow female colleagues. And this occurred a number of years ago when I stood before approximately 250 leaders across our division. I was really disheartened that of the 3 C-suite positions that I had just filled, there were 0 women in the final slate of candidates presented to the various search committees. And I was distressed by that. First of all, I didn't want that to be my legacy, but I firmly believe that decision-making, women belonged at that executive team. So I challenged the women in the audience to step up. And there were a lot of male counterparts in the audience, and I said, you could all take a break or look at your phones. I challenged the women in the audience to step up. I wanted more women on that executive leadership team. And I asked them to let me know if they were interested in advancing their careers in our system. One woman came up to me at the end of the forum, and she said she wanted to be the CEO. She actually said, I want your job. And I said, terrific. I met with her a number of times, and then I asked one of our male board members to mentor her. In our organization and in many of the health systems, and I think many larger corporations, mid-level leaders have little access to board members, many of whom those board members are terrific mentors. So I had established previously a board mentoring process a few years prior. And so then I arranged her to be mentored by a very seasoned retired executive. She is subsequently being promoted, and I have little doubt that one day she will advance further and likely become a CEO. One other woman came forward later on, and she has also progressed. I understand that for the other women in the audience, the timing may not be right to seek a promotion based on family responsibilities, care of parents, whatever is happening in their lives at the moment. However, I believe you can really lead from any chair and truly desire louder voices from women. And that's why an institute such as this, a program such as this, is so critical. It may not be the timing now, but in the future, you practice those skills and your leadership is essential for our organizations. So based on this experience, this is the advice I would share. And I started calling them the 10 rules to keep in mind. And then I thought, most of the women that I know would rather prefer breaking rules than following them. So maybe their guidelines or recommendations may be more palatable. So here they are. And I think we're going to share some of those. The first one is know yourself, your strengths, and never diminish or apologize for them. There is a difference between being humble and being self-dismissive. I hired often based upon humility, drives, brains, and coachability. Being humble doesn't mean minimizing your strengths. Accept who you are, build on your strengths, and don't try to be who others think you should be. Be you. Be proud of your drive and desire to succeed. Know what your greatest talents are, learn them, hone them, and use them. The second guideline is Put your game face on and never let them see you sweat. Always tap into your confidence in yourself, even if you have to dig very deep to find it. Even when you have to tighten that gut to feel the strength. Live in that no fear mode. Self-confidence in your self-confidence engenders and strengthens others' confidence in you. And I'm not perfect in this regard. I will admit, at times we are all inconsistent with our preferred leadership. But sometimes I'd need to connect with those who had my back and recoup and then go right back at it. So I'd regain my confidence and work towards being self-confident consistently. Third, don't make the reality of gender bias an excuse and give up or become angry about it. Accept the reality, recognize it, challenge it, navigate through it with thoughtful skill and purposeful intent to achieve. Fourth, own 100% responsibility for achieving results through relationships. In this complicated business world, which isn't, as you know, getting any simpler, it is exceedingly rare that a single individual produces results. Typically, it requires a team or multiple teams to accomplish great things. Results are achieved through relationships. I really like Kim Scott's book, Radical Candor. Her message to care personally and challenge directly resonated with me, and I really consider it a must read. 5, speak up, advocate for yourself, take credit when it is due, certainly while recognizing the team's contribution, because as I said, everything is a team and you need to be a good team partner. The book Lean In by Sheryl Sandberg, Women Work and the Will to Lead, I do think is worth reading and discussing with colleagues. Number 6, check your ego, but don't give it away. If you are presented with a goal or a project or a outcome that is needed that is clearly hampered by gender bias and no amount of persistence, influence, your best efforts will change that dynamic. What I've done is assign a male to the project to get it achieved, or partner with a male. You just have to recognize that if it's a barrier that you can't get through, how else are you going to go around it? So I've used strategy to overcome the bias or build that diverse coalition. 7, seek advice from other leaders, regardless of gender, and maintain and pursue strong relationships with smart, diverse thinking women. You'll learn a ton, and you'll have a lot of laughs and a lot of fun along the way. You may have to be the one who initiates these relationships, and don't wait for others to pursue you. To just go for it. Number 8, create your own diverse network or club. If you recognize that you're, quote, not wanted in a particular men's club or men's circle, don't force it. Include those, create your own network, your own diverse network or club, includes those who want to be in it, and enjoy the freedom to connect with whom you choose to connect. I'm a firm believer that time is one of our most precious and finite resources. So enjoy the fun of connecting with whom brings you to the light. Number 9, pay it forward for other women. Whenever you see potential, their potential, and have opportunity to pay it forward. Open the doors, break the glass ceiling with them, coach, mentor, promote, or throw a lifeline to other women when needed. By lifeline, I mean, if another female colleague is demonstrating a self-limiting behavior, throw her a lifeline with compassionate clarity. Point it out to her, have her back, but be clear. As I mentioned earlier, from McKinsey research in 2011, men are promoted on potential and women are promoted based upon previous achievements. So look for women with potential. Celebrate success of achievement, both your own and that of other women. Number 10, advocate for fair, just treatment of women. Call it out when you see the barriers, question the barriers or indifference to women or their input whenever you see it. Be inclusive whenever possible and create opportunities to highlight the contributions of other women. Now, all that said, if you think I'm saying the work of including women and facilitating their progress as leaders is just a job for women, think again. Male leaders need to be intentional and active as well. And truly, Barack Obama could have been amplifying women's voices in meetings too. So here's a few steps men can take. First, actively seeking and listening to input from women, requiring that all leadership searches result in a pool of applicants and finalists that is gender diverse. And quite frankly, ditto on many other forms of diversity, but I think that's another session or talk. Men need to treat women as equal, expect leadership from women and positive results, recognize the strengths and talents, give credit when credit is due, engage with women in authentic, crucial conversations, provide the encouragement and opportunity, and then critically examining the inherent biases that hold women back, including that ugly accomplishments versus issues that I raised earlier. Last year, with the death of Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, we lost a truly inspirational woman leader, a woman of both accomplishment and potential. She never gave up fighting for her own seat at the table, or a bench, seat at the bench, if you will, and the seats of all other women. She once said, "Women belong in all places where decisions are being made. It shouldn't be that women are the exception." On this important day for women and the kickoff for this series, I ask you to join me in challenging ourselves. Let's be intentional, purposeful, and active in advancing the cause of women in leadership. Our society needs us more now than ever. So thank you. Thank you for listening. Thank you for continuing your own pathway to advancing women in leadership. Thank you.
Thank you so much for those words of wisdom, Teresa. We appreciate them. We do have a few questions, and we'll take a few minutes to answer those if you don't mind.
Nope, questions are great.
The first one is from Nicole. What do you consider your leadership style, and how is that shaped by experience as being female?
Great question. And leadership styles evolve over time, certainly. My style is definitely participative and a mentoring style. I really believe that your responsibility in leadership, one of the, particularly the higher you are in an organization, is to create leadership capacity. So one of my responsibilities as a CEO, or when I served as a chief operating officer, or when I served as a chief nursing officer, was to create capacity with others. So I knew at the end of the day that there were often decisions I had to make on my own, but encouraging, mentoring, and developing others so that when you leave an organization, it stands well. And there's also a gift that comes back to you of um, feeling good about developing other people. Plus, you want to make sure that you have built an organization that if something happened to you, I don't like the phrase hit by a bus, maybe it's win the lottery, whatever, that you've left the organization in a solid, well-run way. Certainly developing others was key to my leadership. I am definitely a results through relationships person. On an interview once, I was asked, "Oh, well, are you more of a results person or a relationship person?" And I thought the question was naive, because we don't get things accomplished without people, right? Particularly the bigger the business. If it's a customer relationships or it's a complicated operational business, it takes it takes relationships to achieve those results. So I am definitely a results through relationship person.
All right, thank you for that. Jessica asks, this is a two-part question, so I'll break it out for you.
Okay.
Please tell me how women can reconcile both being a mother of young children and/or caregiver for aging parents, and also manage an executive leadership role that often requires all of our time and energy from wake to sleep.
I anticipated this question because over the years I've dealt with it often. My husband owned and operated 5 restaurants, and I was an executive for 30 years, and we have 4 children. Now think about that. That was a lot to balance. So and there were many days that I wondered, what in the world? But I think there are a couple of things. One, you have to have a good partner, whoever that is. I would watch, particularly when I was a chief nursing officer, women who had small kids and spouses traveled, that they'd often need to back away. And I would help them from what they were doing, particularly if they had a full-time job. I would try to work with them to find part-time work, because it is a lot. So you have to look at what your own resources are. You have to it requires a good partner. I was blessed with a mother who was much smarter than I was, and who lived less than a mile away and said, nope, you can't quit this. You can't give up. You are too much like me, and you don't know yourself well enough, so go. And I will take care of your kids. I'll bring them to soccer. I'll take them to the doctor's office, blah, blah, blah. We also hired resources to help us. We worked through the Au Pair in America program while the kids were very little. So you have to find support. Second thing is, I always benefited from a group of women colleagues in formal programs. Professional Dimensions in Milwaukee, or Tempo, were women's groups that were fairly large in Milwaukee. And I found a lot of support listening to their shared stories. As Bridget was explaining earlier, those shared stories, they were like, I can do this. I can figure this out. And as you look back after 40 years, it was crazy. I mean, it was busy. The house was never perfect. There were things that just didn't have to be perfect. And that perfection at home, the It worked though. You figured it out. You have to know yourself first. That first guideline or rule is know yourself. And if you will be frustrated at home, either find a way to balance it or find the resources and do what you need to do. So I think finding balance is critically important. A female colleague that I have tremendous respect for once said, this whole work-life balance is like riding a bike. Sometimes you're pedaling really hard and really fast, and sometimes you just have to skate a little bit. So finding your own balance is crucial. I have to say, and I'll brag for a moment, that what you have to evaluate is your relationships. So I have 4 adult children, 3 of 4 are married. All 4 are contributing effectively to society. I'm pretty proud of them. And I have a relationship with my spouse that has lasted 42 years. So I think we did okay. It can be done. It does take thoughtful intention and actually knowing what works for yourself.
Right. So the second part of Jessica's question is, how can we choose to serve in elected state and national roles, knowing that we are choosing to leave our children and our aging parents behind at home? Even today, many roles require physically being visible in the office from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m.
Very true. And healthcare was more like being in the office from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. or 8 p.m. It's a very, healthcare delivery is a very in-person requirement. Visibility was huge. So I haven't ever held an elected office. I actually didn't have to travel too much until the kids were older. And finding the support systems for yourself is really pretty tough. I remember having to go to, which still bothers me, this was 90%, 99% women in this health system in this particular role, and we were required to fly out on Mother's Day. Which was ridiculous, to a meeting in place that Monday morning, that Sunday night required a meeting, and most of those women were moms. So I think we needed, what I would have done now was push back much harder on that date and say, you know what, that meeting should start Monday at noon, in respect for all these moms and women that were coming to this meeting. So I do think the travel piece is tough, and I do think finding your support systems, developing them, even if they're a little unusual. As I mentioned, we used au pairs for a while. We also had a nanny that was with us 9 years. And we'd find support through other women, professional women, because that is the biggest issue. For me, that was balancing, supporting my kids, and then when my mom was aging and dying, finding the right support to balance that. You learn to rely on others, and actually I wasn't very good at the beginning of my career to learn to ask for help. And I think that's probably a good guideline to add, is ask for help when you need it.
Wonderful, thank you. As kind of a follow-up, another attendee is asking about, you commented that it requires a good partner. Women don't always plan or choose to be single parents or choose to have aging ill parents. So what advice would you have for single women?
That's something that I've had tremendous respect for single moms my whole life. It is tough. So maybe not a partner, but other resources. The line, "It takes a village," that came out of Africa is very true. Finding friends, colleagues, a team that helps support you. So obviously I didn't, when my kids were in school, I wasn't one of the moms that was helping out at school a lot. But I developed those friendships and relationships and gave them support whenever we could, or thanked them profusely for all the support that they provided there. And sometimes that's the partner that you need. It's that village of friends that helps pick up the kids from soccer, or helps get them to whatever thing, a sporting event or debating thing they're doing at school. It really is looking for those resources and making sure you're a good partner or friend on the other side, so that when they need you, you help them out, because it's a balance. It's a two-way street. But it is tougher. It's tougher.
Thank you. Another question we have is, how has mentorship helped your career?
I had some pretty brilliant mentors, and that's why I was very committed to develop the board mentoring process within HSHS and within our division. For me, there are and I certainly saw this in Greater Green Bay. One of the things that struck me when I came in 2009 to Greater Green Bay was how willing people were to share their time, talent, and their advice. There's a remarkable giving back sense in the Greater Green Bay community, and so tap into that. So some of the mentors that I had would point out to you things that were obvious to them that might not be obvious to you, and give you guidance. There were female mentors and there were male mentors. And I recently wrote down some of the gratitude that I had for those individuals, because it truly is important to you as you listen to that feedback. Know that they have your back, but they're giving you feedback that sometimes you may not want to hear. And your willingness to listen is crucial. And that's why I like the Kim Scott book, because she starts with, you have to care about the person first, and they have to know it before they can accept the critical feedback. But you have to be willing to listen, because critical feedback is a gift, in my view. You give it, it is a gift that you have the choice to act upon or not. And sometimes it's hard to hear, and so you'll just say, "Well, thank you for that. I have to think about it." But it's mentoring it's a privilege to be able to mentor others, and it's a privilege to be mentored by others.
Great. So, question came in: who is your role model?
That's interesting. I've had a few. I'm a very spiritual person, so and I follow the framework of Jesus Christ, and that's a role model for me, as is Mother Teresa is a role model to me. I also am inspired by Ruth Bader Ginsburg. I think she took on many things new. So I don't have one. I have a lot, but I think those frameworks, for me, a spiritual framework has been important in how I live my life, and that's a personal choice.
All right, thank you for that. If you weren't in healthcare, what industry would you have worked in?
So that's, I'm old, so I'm in my 60s. And when I was going to college, it was interesting. I was expected to go to college, expected to fund it, And I actually took off a year between high school and college, which shocked some people because I was a good student, but I had to fund my college. And I now have 2 master's degrees, and pretty much either funded that myself or made sure I got scholarships along the way. But no one talked to me about what you're good at and what you're not. And that was the era. So I certainly approached that differently than with my 4 kids, trying to pursue that. But that was the era. You were expected to go because both my parents had gone to college, but you were expected to go, you were expected to figure it out yourself and to fund it yourself, which is really pretty funny. I went into nursing. So I have a master's in nursing and an MBA. And I went into nursing because my older cousin, who I had tremendous respect for, was a nurse. And that's the much thought I gave to it. If I hadn't gone into healthcare, I'm fairly left brain. I probably would have gone into finance. I have 2 sons. One's an economist and the other's a financial exec. And I kind of pushed all the kids to at least understand money. You need to understand money, whatever pathway you're going to choose for your career. And my 2 daughters, one is got her master's in healthcare, and she serves at the Medical College of Wisconsin in a director role and children's specialty group. And then my youngest daughter is very uniquely different than me, very artistic and always into fashion. She used to tell me on occasion, "Don't leave the house, that outfit again." And she works in Manhattan at Macy's. So I think I would have gone into finance, actually.
Okay. Another comment, I guess, and a question from another attendee is: the overwhelming amount of women being forced to leave the workforce during the pandemic to care for women speaks volumes to the gender bias in the workforce. They had someone tell them that they could not be a leader and be successful by still having work-life balance. Can you speak to that work-life balance?
Absolutely. And that is feedback that I would say, interesting, and would probably use as drive to prove that cannot be, that doesn't have to be true. I think this pandemic has made the discrepancy for women and their career earning potential even tremendously worse. And why these types of sessions, this type of program that UWGB is doing in collaboration with Bridget's company, I think that's why this is critical. This world, our country, our organizations will be better when women have equal voices at all tables, decision-making tables. I'm convinced. I do think women helping each other figure out the resources to support so that you can work in leadership. And I think that's just hogwash that women can't work in leadership. I think there's way too much evidence that that's not true. And I would take that as a drive to do something about it. And whoever asked that question, if you know that you have leadership skills or are driven to lead and to fix things and to improve things and make them better, then go for it. Find the resources, search the resources, ask for help. I think I would put that in the not useful feedback, other than motivating me to drive to prove them wrong feedback.
Okay, thank you for that. Another attendee is asking, we know that throughout history that women of color have had an otherness placed on them. How do women of color reach the same heights as white women when white women are given the priority in many situations?
Interesting. Because recently, well, obviously not being a person of color, however, sensitive to bias that is built in, regardless if it's color or gender or whatever, or age, um, because ageism is another talk too. I have been impressed by many of the women of color that have been such strong leaders. And I've wondered if it's because they learned early on that they have needed to be driven. That I'm thinking that we need to keep working at decreasing those barriers too. And women of color need to look at all of the challenges that they've had from youth and use that as building blocks to be even stronger leaders. Because there's incredibly powerful women of color. I look at the inauguration speech by the young woman, the poet laureate, who I'm blocking on her name at the moment, Amanda Gorman. That was so moving. And I just stood in awe. I thought, this is tremendous. All the things that you've overcome in your young life, that you'll continue to amaze the world.
Okay. Thank you. Susan is asking you to expand a little bit more on your principle of check your ego. Don't women need more ego?
So that is and I thought about that. Check your ego, but don't give it away. I think we have a lot of ego. But if this is the results part of getting things accomplished. If you've banged your head so many times on trying to get something accomplished and no amount of persistence or navigating it, then be creative and work around it to get the results. And then use strategy. Maybe you have to deal with it again. The example I'll give, one of the examples, is I was trying to conclude a pretty complicated negotiation on a contract deal. It was very clear to me that the individual across the table from me could not handle a woman of power across the table. And getting this contract done was very important because it was a key service that was needed actually for females. And the irony is this individual primarily cared for women, but he couldn't handle women in power. He only needed women in subservient roles. Anyway, I needed to get this done. The timing was really important. So I went back to our executive leadership team and I said, all right, this dude cannot handle me. And I think I need a male counterpart, either taking the lead, me out of the room. It didn't matter. So that was it. Don't let your ego or the frustration of the gender bias get in the way of getting what is accomplished, because it's what needs to be, the results that was needed was more important than who did it. I hope that makes sense. Does that answer that? It's getting the results achieved that was really important. And I had to say, all right, we'll deal with this later, and partner with another person negotiate the situation for me.
Thank you for that example. What should you look for in a job or institution when first starting out in the workforce? What advice could you give?
That's a great question, because I don't know in a Zoom environment, in a remote environment, how you assess the culture of an organization. And it must be incredibly challenging to assess, how am I going to fit in this culture when everything is offline? Because part of it is the culture is how you work to get things done. So know what's important to you, in that culture. So for me, when I was assessing healthcare organizations early on, I had a female mentor, a professor at UWM, that said, well, what's more important to you? Is research, teaching, or patient care more important? And I said, oh, direct patient care is more important. She said, well, look for that in the mission statement. And sometimes people will poo-poo the mission statements or the core values of the organization. See what it says and see if you can assess it being offline, which is really hard. But assess what's important to you in that organization, and mission statements and what the values of the organization are stated, even if they're not perfect, are they striving to be that? That it has to resonate with who you are. I worked with a young, very talented nurse who left an organization, left a hospital, because the nurse-physician relationships were so destructive and women were being put down. And this was a very smart critical care nurse. And so what she did was did temporary work at a number of places to see what the culture felt like and to see if the organization was going to support strong patient-centered nurses or let abusive behavior continue. So if there is a way, and if there is a way in whatever industry you're in, to assess a company in a interim role first, sometimes that's useful too. Also asking current colleagues, what is it really like to work here? And how does that check off what's important to you?
Perfect. Adam would like to know, what advice would you give to male counterparts regarding allyship?
Regarding, pardon?
Being an ally.
Being an ally. I think going back to recognizing women, and that's why I wanted to put that in. You know, some males have told me that, you know, they are intimidated by the women in their workplaces. And I said, well, you don't act that way. But I think actively seeking and listening to input for women, calling it out when, and I had this experience. I had a male colleague early on when I was a new vice president, was, oh, I think Therese just said that. Or, oh yeah, Therese made that point about an hour ago. And that's what allies, male allies, can do. When you see women being intentionally or subconsciously minimized in their contribution, call it out. And I also think encouraging women to see, I expect you're going to be very successful, or I know you can do this. That goes a long way. Or I've seen from who you are that this is important to you, and raise it. So being that ally is really looking for potential in women and pointing it out. And when you're in circles that don't include any women, recognize that, call it out. That's huge.
Mm-hmm. Great advice. Thank you. Diane is asking, can you give examples of how women can help women?
Don't criticize what women are choosing. So when my oldest son was in kindergarten in a suburb of Milwaukee, I was the sole working mom. And at that time, no, so that was a long time ago, but I was the sole mom, and it was a small school. But I needed to know that I needed to work on myself. Don't criticize anyone for their choices. Some moms have to stay home. That's great. They can stay home and they can help the schools, they can help the churches, they can help whatever, and they can be your good friends. So support each other regardless of what roles the people are choosing. If we're walking in their shoes, we may need to be making the same choices. Maybe not, but maybe so. So other women need to support other women by first not criticizing. Everyone's got their own pathway and they bring their own talents to the world, and it's what's important to them or what's needed by them at that time. The other way to support women, I think, is mentoring each other. I think it is coaching each other. I think it's throwing that lifeline when they need it. I actually think it's also celebrating other women, sharing the stories. There were so many times when you think you're at your wit's end and some female colleague will say, oh yeah, I've been there and this is how I handled it. There are so many things you learn from each other that is so critically important. So to me, it comes from that other rule of pay it forward for other women, be a support system to them, make friends with a lot of women, and actually put together groups of women, talk about issues that affect women, and help support women be successful in the workplace.
And that's part of what the Institute is all about.
Exactly, exactly. And you know, there's different skill sets. And you may have a skill set that is very useful to someone else, or you see a skill set that you don't have and you need to be surrounded by. Go and seek that. And seek opportunities like this. You know, we are all work in process, no matter what age we are or where we are in our career, we're all works in process. That commitment to continuing to develop, to self-reflect, and to grow and learn. I have a strong bias to formal education, but I also have a strong bias to certificates or continuing education opportunities. It's hugely important to who you are. I think continuing to learn, even in my mid-60s, is part of living an enthusiastic full life. So keep going to things like this and taking the time.
Right. Wonderful. Another attendee is asking, I feel like my ability to succeed and get more leadership roles has been limited based on the unfortunate issue of having insecure males above me who are intimidated by me and spent their efforts pushing me down instead of utilizing and valuing my skills. How can you effectively deal with this situation?
And that's part of banging the head. I've been there. And unfortunately, sometimes that's not male, or it can be female too, when you intimidate others by your strength. First of all, I would say assess, are you being a good team member? And then if you are, I would look for other alternatives. Are there other people around that individual that you can build that coalition with to get things accomplished? I've been in the situation where your work was assumed by others and they took the credit for that, or they uninvited you to meetings where they were really presenting your work. That is incredibly frustrating. But I do think eventually by working through others, it's recognized for that because your strength or your commitment and your knowledge or drive or your experience in getting things done is seen by others. You may have to make sure others see that too by telling stories and showing those results. But those are very frustrating situations. And in one of those situations, I needed to leave the organization. So, you know, make those decisions, obviously, well thought out, and but that is a reality. It happens, and it happens that people will be intimidated by you. Doesn't mean you need to change. It means that the only advice I would say, and I'd look to the others on the call for more advice, is work with others to show that, to make sure you're getting credit for what you have achieved, and build a coalition around that single individual if it's possible.
All right. Corrine is asking, how would you recommend breaking the barriers that stand between women supporting other women in the same workplace?
Barriers, I'm not sure I understand the question. So women are unable to support the other women in the same workplace?
I believe that's what she's asking, yes.
Okay. That one's challenging for me. I don't think I've seen that where women are prevented from supporting each other. I've had more opportunity to work around that situation. You see the barrier, you label it, and you call it out, and then you work through others, male and female, because many people know that it's just not right what's occurring. And so you can use your male counterparts, in my mind, to help that. I think that one I'd have to think about more. I don't have it. There's not an easy answer for that because I don't understand the context very well. But what I would tell you is that every time you run into a barrier, it might back you up for a moment, but you think through strategically how to get around it. And if there are other individuals, regardless of gender, work around that to get through it. And sometimes you have to be I'm not a very patient person. Sometimes you have to be a little bit more patient and manage my own frustration. But see strategically what other options can I think through to enhance that situation.
Okay, thank you. That was a tough one, but great advice. You mentioned your Grandma Gaga role. What would you want to teach your grandchildren as they grow up in regards to leadership?
First of all, and this was really important to me when I was raising my 4 kids, is equality. That every person has a right to achieve. Every person is a dignified human being and needed to be treated as such. Thankfully, I was raised by a mom that thought skin color was similar to hair color. It made no difference in who you are. And I was very grateful for that, and actually taught that to my children too, and actually had to purposely keep them away from some relatives that did not share that belief. The most important thing that I would teach my grandkids is love the people you are around. Love is pretty crucial, and continue to try to be the best person you are. I have grandchildren that range from 11 to 4 months, and it's delightful to be in the role of unconditional love for whomever they are. The other thing is keep making the world better. Whatever path you are, make the world better. Leave whatever job you had better than when you found it, and keep making the world better. That would be it.
Wonderful advice. And with that, I think we have gotten through all of our questions. So Thank you for taking some time today to answer those.